Welcome again. Welcome everybody. It's great to have all of you here for this webinar on youth innovators tackling sustainable forest management and biodiversity conservation in a changing climate. The webinar is organized by the World Forestry Congress Secretariat, and it's part of an ongoing webinar series that we've started this year, will go on next year, to build capacity and building momentum towards the Congress, and especially targeting youth engagement. My name is Pier Andrea Pirani, and like I said, I'm calling in from northern Italy, where I'm based at the moment. I'm collaborating with the WFC Secretariat, and I'm part of the facilitation team today. As I mentioned before, today it's really been a team effort to put this webinar together, and you'll hear from several of our colleagues. Many more are working in the background to make this session possible. A quick reminder, I mean, we're 2 years in the pandemic, so we know how to behave on online meetings, but please, particularly a reminder specifically to keep your microphone muted if you're not talking, so we avoid sound issues, and especially to engage with the various activities that we have in store for you today. I forgot to add one slide here, but let me remind you that interpretations are available from English, from and to English and French and Spanish. So you are encouraged to use the interpretation feature if you would like to do so. And please, let's use the chat throughout as a common dialogue space. All right, so quickly on what the program for today, and it's really rich. It's a holiday magic box, I guess. We'll start with some warm-up and networking in a second. We have already started. We'll then hear from Peter Choka from the WFC Secretariat. He's going to give us some welcome remarks. And then we'll have the first content sessions. We'll have a presentation that will set the scene in terms of what are the key issues and topics when we talk about nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation and mitigation and biodiversity conservation. But that's not all. We'll then move into a chat show. The second part of our webinar will be a chat show where we hear from some of the participants, their stories of change. I really look forward, well, to all the webinar, but to this session probably in particular. But that's not all. After the panel, we have more. We have a presentation that will give us some practical tips on how we can create videos. As you probably know, we're currently running a video competition, a Forest Change Maker. So this session hopefully will give you some guidance and tips on how you can create and submit your video, your Changemaker video, and participate in the competition. Finally, we'll go into closing. We will try to be on time and to close at 3:30 Rome time. But we'll also would like to keep the room open for some informal networking at the end of the session. Like you would do in a physical workshop, the workshop ends, you hang around, you mingle, you have a chat. So this is the program for today. Now, let's warm up a bit. In the meantime, we got 50 people in the room, so welcome to everybody that has joined us now and is still joining. So warm-up activity, we're going to do a Mentee Poll. It's very simple. You'll get a link in the chat, or if you have your phone, you can scan the QR code that you see on the screen. That will open Mentimeter, and when you'll open the link, you'll be presented with two polls, if you will. In the first one, I'm going to go back to the QR code in a second, but in the first one you'll have a map, and we'll ask you to pin yourself on the map. And in the second question, we would like to know, how did you hear about this event? And you'll have some options. So I believe that the link to Mentee has been put in the chat now. Thank you very much, Amos. So follow the link in the chat and open the Mentee. or I go back one slide. If you've got your phone in your hand, you can also scan the QR code. Right? Two questions, two Mentee questions. Pin yourself onto the map and indicate where you learn about this webinar. I'm going to change slightly my screen, if you just give me a second, so we can see the results, the live results coming in. Just give me a second, I'm pulling up my... All right, so you should now see my screen. Please let me know if you're not. Yeah, I realize the map is a bit small, so it's difficult to really pinpoint exact countries. I think we're more looking at the region. So if you can pin yourself in the nearby the location where you're calling from, will be great. It's nice to see we're really an audience spanning from Indonesia, Singapore, so Southeast Asia, all the way to North America, and Latin America. I think both Argentina and Chile, if my geography is good enough. We're getting more pins from Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, Western Europe. So this is great. Please keep mapping yourself, put yourself onto the map. It's nice to have a visual representation of where we're connecting from today. So this was the first Mentee. The second one, how did you hear about this event? Get quite a nice mix, I guess. Votes are still coming in. So the majority is from colleagues, word of mouth, but yeah, we always tend to trust a lot the recommendation from friends and colleagues, right? But yeah, Facebook and social media also catching up. I think there is quite a nice mix, I guess, from different channels. Probably, yeah, it would be nice to know what other channels are. So if you have selected others, you may want to let us know in the chat what these other channels are. All right, I'm going to just change. Thank you very much for participating in this Mentee activity, in this warm-up. Let me go back to our slides. And I'm moving on to the next one. So it's my pleasure to now welcome Peter Ciocca, the Associate Secretary General of the World Forestry Congress, to come in and join us for some welcome remarks. Peter, I saw you briefly when you came in. Let me see if I can see you or I can hear you.
You should see me and hopefully you can hear me too.
I can hear you. I'm trying to locate you in my screen, but please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Pierre Andrea, and welcome everybody to this third webinar in the youth series. This is great to have you all on the call. Actually, we are talking about two things, but that is pretty much the same. We are talking about youth and we are talking about innovation today. By definition, that means the same, because you are the ones who need to innovate and who need to drive the change, especially now when we have discovered that many of the things we have been doing over years, decades, and maybe centuries are not working anymore as they used to be, and that we invented something which was actually already at the very beginning nature-based solutions. And the big innovation is that we discovered that we should do everything with nature because we have been trying to do it without nature and it didn't work. And everything we have around us with climate change, also biodiversity, etc., it's all about forgetting nature and nature-based solutions. So it's your turn now to change the course of the development and then bring us back, bring everybody back to the path that is possible and that is sustainable. We will be also talking a little bit about a competition that we would like to draw your attention to, because we would like to hear about your success stories, your great ideas. And as you know, the winner will be invited to the World Forestry Congress to present achievements there. So there is a speaking slot associated with this competition today. I really don't want to spend too much time of yours with stupid and useless introduction because there are very knowledgeable colleagues on the agenda talking about substance here. So I again would like to thank you for joining the webinar, being with us, and I hope that you will take inspiration from this webinar, and more importantly, we hope that we all will take inspiration from your examples and from your ideas. So with that, I give it back to you, Pier Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for the call to action. I'm just passing over quickly to Amos so we can proceed with our program today. Let me just move on to the next slides, and I'd like to invite Amos to come in, please.
Thank you very much, Pier Andrea, for inviting me. And thank you very much, Peter, for those warm words of welcome and for acknowledging the role of youth and young people in the forest sector and for affirming the commitment of also recognizing this within the World Forestry Congress to prioritize youth engagement in the lead to and at the Congress. Welcome once again, everyone, to this third webinar in the World Forestry Congress Youth Webinar Series. My name is Amos Emanubo. I'm the Youth Outreach and Liaison for the World Forestry Congress, and today your co-host alongside Alina, who will come in shortly. The main objective of this webinar is to highlight the role of youth as a constructive and inspirational force engaged in innovative activities that are transforming ecosystems and livelihoods through the forest sector and nature-based solutions, as has been recognized by Peter. And accordingly, highlight the Forest Changemaker competition as an opportunity that exists for the youth to engage at the World Forestry Congress through these lines. So, yeah, Pierre, if you could quickly move to the next slide. Yeah, so today, to set the stage for the substance of today's webinar, I have the pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Amy Duchell. Amy Duchell is a senior forestry officer and team leader of climate change and resilience in the FAO's forestry division. Amy joined FAO in July in 2021 from the Center for International Forestry Research in Indonesia, where she led the climate change, energy, and low carbon development team. And before that, she was based in Brazil. She has an extensive experience on forestry and climate change issues, including through her leadership of C4's global comparative study on the REDD+. She holds a PhD in tropical forestry from the University of Florida, and has written over 80 scientific publications on forestry and climate change. She works with a diverse set of partners to protect and restore tropical forests, which are very important, of course, while enhancing their rights, which is a very important aspect as well, the livelihoods and adaptive capacities of the local people. Amy will unpack today with us here nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation and mitigation and biodiversity conservation. I invite us to all be present as we gain valuable insights into what topical issues are emerging in nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation and mitigation and biodiversity conservation, how nature-based solutions should also be optimized to reach their full potential in addressing these challenges, and what some of the challenges are. In case you have any questions during these presentations, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. I now hand us over to Amy Duchell. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Amos, for the kind invitation. It's really nice to be able to participate with you all today. And I mean, the idea here is really to just present a few framing slides, but I'm hoping that we can have a discussion around nature-based solutions over the next 20 minutes or so. So let me just share my screen with you. Let's see if I can get the right one. Let me know if you're seeing the PowerPoint presentation there. Does that look okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's all good, Amy.
Okay, good.
Good.
Okay, just you never know. Okay, great. So what we're talking about today are nature-based solutions for climate change, adaptation and mitigation, and biodiversity conservation. And this is also the title of subtheme 2 for the World Forestry Congress. And I'm one of the organizers of that subtheme, along with Shaila Verts-Konikoff, who's at FAO's Regional Asia Pacific office. She's a senior forestry officer there. And Ms. Ryun King, who's at the Korea Forest Research Institute. So everything we're doing at FAO is in collaboration with our Korean partners as well in the lead up to the World Forestry Congress. So nature-based solutions, there is a well-accepted definition of what these are. And really it was IUCN that has propelled nature-based solutions to the international stage. And their definition are actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, and simultaneously provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits. So this is really a broad definition, and you can see that it's nature-based solutions for sustainable development more broadly, and that nature-based solutions won't be effective unless they're really involving people and protecting and valuing biodiversity as well. I should say that nature-based solutions, really IUCN brought that term to the Climate Change Convention process in 2009, and then that was accepted by their membership in 2016. So it's not that it's recent, but it's over the last 5 years or so that nature-based solutions have really begun to gain traction, and in some ways be even taken on by many different actors, including more recently fossil fuel companies, and sort of calling into question really what are nature-based solutions and how should we be defining them. So I think it is important to kind of go back to the original definition to understand the origin of the concept. So in our subtheme, and when we're talking about this, we're talking about nature-based solutions for climate mitigation, adaptation, and biodiversity conservation. So just to start with nature-based solutions for climate mitigation, there's really been a lot of work done on this topic. And I would like to recognize here the Nature Conservancy, who's really developed, their scientists have developed quite a bit of work on natural climate solutions. So really looking at different ways of protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing nature to mitigate climate change and reduce emissions. So you can sort of see the different pathways, and it starts with reforestation. And these are, this is interesting because they actually relate it to the taking millions of cars off of the road. So, each of those cars is in millions. So reforestation is really one of the big pathways for reducing emissions and enhancing the carbon sink of the terrestrial carbon sink. Avoided forest conversion, I think this is really the call to halt deforestation. And that's really critically important because not only are you getting climate benefits from not deforesting, but you're also all of the biodiversity and livelihood benefits that forests provide. Natural forest management, avoided peatland impacts, and then it kind of goes on and on, through agroforestry approaches, trees and cropland, coastal wetlands, these are sort of the main mitigation pathways that nature has to offer. So if you can see, if you think about, from a forestry perspective, forests are critically important for mitigation, and all of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change scenarios that were presented a few months ago in their latest report, they really count on the land sink, especially forests, in all of their modeling. So if we want to stay below 1.5 degree warming, we do need the world's forests, not only because when you cut forests, they release greenhouse gases, but also because they suck carbon out of the atmosphere. So without standing forest, restored forests, sustainably managed forests, we simply cannot stay below 1.5 degrees warming. But of course, forests and trees are also critical for adaptation. And here's a really nice paper. It's about 10 years old at this point, but I think it tells 6 stories of how forests and trees contribute to climate change adaptation. And if we think of, just sort of the provisioning services, so these authors are really looking at ecosystem services that are provided by forests and trees and how those translate into adaptation services, not only for rural communities, but even at higher levels as well. So, if we think of the most basic provisioning services, so product diversity, I was part of a study at C4 when I was doing my PhD that I was working in Brazil and Bolivia and Peru at the time, but it was a network of about 30 students. And we essentially, at our field sites, quantified the contribution of forest income for rural communities. And this was income in terms of both cash, but also subsistence income. And basically, globally, that study showed that 28% of rural incomes of people living near and around forests came from forest products. And that was almost as much as crop income. So that's really impressive that, 10,000 years after the Industrial Revolution, the contribution of forests and trees to local livelihoods is almost as important as crops. And so we know that, for communities that are coping with climate change, they can use forests as safety nets, but also think about anticipatory strategies of diversifying their production in a changing climate. But of course, forests and trees also provide a series of regulating services. So, FAO, of course, we have a big focus on food and agriculture. And, trees are absolutely essential for agriculture, both in keeping temperatures in check, but also pollination services and everything else. Watershed regulation kind of can't be underestimated, how the relationships between forests and water are critical, including for agriculture. Coastal protection, if we think of mangrove forests, for example, urban microclimates, so trees in urban areas and how that regulates climates. And then, of course, regional climates. And I think that evidence base is becoming extremely clear. And so this paper was written 10 years ago, and we had very little evidence about regional climate effects of having forests. But we now know that deforestation in the Amazon actually affects not only southern Brazil in terms of, crop production, but also parts of the United States and the Midwestern United States in terms of actually the rainfall that patterns that are affected by deforestation adversely affecting crop production very far away from the source. So that's also a critical role for forests and trees. I think one thing that we really, especially as the private sector and fossil fuel companies in particular have adopted some of the nature-based solutions language, there are some risks that are really coming to the fore about nature-based solutions. And some of that is a climate risk. So to stay below 1.5 degrees warming, we must basically end our reliance on fossil fuels as we know it. And nature-based solutions cannot be a substitute for making that transition. I think that's critically important, that we absolutely have to change our energy transport industries while also protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing nature. But we cannot think that nature is going to save us so that we can continue business as usual. Biodiversity risks. There have been many concerns with projects tree planting projects, let's say. If those tree planting projects are going over native ecosystems, maybe even where there weren't trees, or clearing native forest for tree planting, things like this. And so really making sure that biodiversity is not adversely affected by so-called nature-based solutions. And then I think critically important are the risks for local livelihoods and rights. And this is, nature-based solutions, this was a global concept. It's top down in a certain way, at least from the definition. And if we're not really drawing on the expertise, knowledge, participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities, there are, not only are we missing a huge opportunity to do this in the right way, but also creating serious risks for their livelihoods and rights. So in response to some of these risks, the IUCN has also, about 2 years ago, developed a global standard for nature-based solutions that incorporates these 8 elements and kind of guiding policymakers and implementers in best practice for nature-based solutions. It doesn't mean that the rest of us shouldn't be still sort of engaged in a critical way and making sure that these holistic approaches are actually holistic and benefiting people and nature, but that there is at least a standard that exists to try to get everyone on the same page of what this should look like. So in sub-theme 2 at the World Forestry Congress, we have a series of sessions, I think 5, and several of them really focus on forests and trees as key to enhancing ambition in the context of the 3 Rio conventions. So for those who were following the Glasgow COP recently, we know that nature came absolutely to the center of that COP. And even in the preamble of the Glasgow Climate Pact, there's very strong language about protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing ecosystems and respecting the rights and livelihoods of local people who depend on those ecosystems. In the Convention on Biological Diversity, of course, nature is central to that convention already, but for the post-Aichi targets and the global framework on biodiversity, making sure that contribution the contribution of forests and trees is recognized. And then also in the context of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, the land degradation neutrality targets also are leveraging more and more forests and trees in terms of halting desertification. So several of the sessions at the World Forestry Congress will focus on those conventions. And for example, in the context of the climate work, we will probably have a very strong representation from the UK government, the outgoing presidency of COP26, who really brought nature to the front of the negotiations, and what are the next steps for that. So hearing from them and of course, partner countries in moving this forward. Then there will also be a session dedicated to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which is of course co-led by FAO and UNEP. And that's providing an opportunity to scale nature-based solutions through sharing lessons learned and promoting best practices. So again, all of FAO and partners' experience with forest landscape restoration will be highlighted there, and it should be really quite a good session, after the launch of the UN Decade this year. And then finally, we'll be looking at resilient, healthy and resilient forests, and this is really important because forests actually lose their ability to suck carbon from the atmosphere if they're degraded, if they're burned, if they are destroyed by pests and disease. And so really also making sure that forests can fulfill the function that they're currently fulfilling and staying healthy themselves. So thinking about integrated management strategies to support genetic diversity and enhance the forest resistance in a changing climate. So also, there will be a separate forum, and it's not even in this sub-theme because it's sort of so critically important, on forest fire. So there will be an entire separate session, a high-level session on forest fire as well, which is of course relevant to this theme. Finally, I just end with the sort of power of youth, and I think we've seen this maybe nowhere more strongly than in the climate change space, with Vanessa Nakati and Greta as sort of two examples of very powerful young leaders who have really demanded a lot from policymakers and really called into question a lot of these ongoing talks and negotiations without a lot of action on the ground. And so I think all of you who are younger and maybe already even involved in quite a bit of climate activism yourselves, but I do believe that this is really, we need to keep the pressure on the decision makers. It's on for sure. And I think the youth delegation at Glasgow was even more, yes, it was sort of exclusive inside in a certain way, but outside the venue, incredibly powerful coalitions of youth activists who aren't giving up anytime soon. And so I think not only sort of these global activists, but also youth in the communities where nature-based solutions are being proposed and implemented, thinking of ways to really empower youth also in rural communities to become leaders as these solutions are brought forward. So that's sort of the framing that I just wanted to give. I mean, here is my contact information below, but I really do want to just open it up for discussion because it's much more interesting to hear from all of you than just me talking. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Amy, for that wonderful presentation about nature-based solutions as a cross-cutting tool to tackle climate action, biodiversity conservation, and livelihoods, and how forests are fundamental to addressing these challenges. The floor is open. We will take a few questions and we need to move on. I see a question from Hans. Hans, may I please request you to quickly unmute yourself and ask your question as we move forward.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Let me hope you are hearing me.
Yes, we hear you. Thank you.
Samuel Hans, I was asking how is NBS dealing with loss and damage in climate change, especially in communities where there is much effect of climate change. You find that there are very many areas being affected by climate change, but they are not being brought on board or to be heard in the different areas so that people can understand what's happening in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans, for your question. And actually, loss and damage was one of the more disappointing outcomes of COP26 because, many of us really hoped for a strong decision on the creation of a facility for loss and damage, for actually beginning to really channel funds in a serious way to countries and communities affected by climate change. And unfortunately, it was just really watered down in the very, very last days, in fact, to more of a there will be a sort of work group kind of moving forward, but it's not the facility that was in some of the original decision text that we were hoping for. So it's something, in fact, to keep putting pressure on. So in your communities, in your countries, and, all of us can continue to do the same, that loss and damage is, you can't adapt to, this is actually, I think Vanessa is the one who said this, you can't adapt to starvation. You can't adapt to some of the serious drought conditions that we're seeing in many of these communities. So we're beyond, unfortunately, the point of adaptation in some places, and those places, in fact, do need funds for loss and damage. So NBS, it's not an exact connection, but really I think what's needed, in fact, for loss and damage right now is massive finance. And that's sort of the next step for that negotiation in the context of UNFCCC.
Thank you very much, Amy, for that response. There is one more question here in the chat. I'm just going to read it out. A question from Aridima Putra. I have one question. How can we ensure that nature-based solutions can be incorporated into climate policy, as we know that some countries are having major financial and governance challenges in implementing it?
Yes, no, I think, I mean, at least let's just say one of our big wins at the global level was getting Article 5 of the Paris Agreement negotiated by all of the members. And that's really, focusing on the role of forests and, REDD+, so reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation and enhancing carbon stocks, if you think about reforestation in that context. So it's in global climate policy. It's actually enshrined in the Paris Agreement, forest-based solutions. And what we're really seeing now is a need for adaptation based on nature to be much more, there's adaptation text in the Paris Agreement, but it's not linked so specifically to forests. And what we're really working on with FAO now is trying to work with countries to help them recognize the potential of forests and trees for their national adaptation strategies. A lot of the national adaptation strategies are focused on crops and livestock, if they're focused on the land use sector. And there's a whole sort of unseen area of forest and trees that policymakers and decision makers could be leveraging for their climate action that is yet to be tapped.
Thank you very much. I think we will pick one or so more question and then move on. There is a question from Dr. Sarada Prasad. How to make aware the indigenous people about the protection of the age-old practices, and where we face Dr. Sarada, could you want to read out your question? I kind of have some challenge.
Yes, sure. Hi, Amos. Hi. So my question is how to aware these indigenous people to protect their age-old practices, because modernization has also been moved to the indigenous people. They want to be modernized. They want to not to use their age-old practices. They are also depending on some modern practices. So we know that due to climate change, we are facing a lot of problems because we are not pertaining to these age-old practices. So how to aware these people, because they are not educated, they are not properly educated, that so they can protect their age-old practices. So this is the big question now. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe just sort of turning it around a little bit in the sense that, now we can never talk about nature-based solutions without talking about indigenous peoples and local communities, really recognizing that many of the areas, in fact, that are still protected in the world are protected because they're under indigenous and traditional management regimes. And so really, in fact, learning and opening the space much more to indigenous peoples and local communities. And I think, again, I really did see this, I think, COP26 was strange in the sense that it was sort of more closed than normal, but I have to say the presidency really did a quite good job of bringing indigenous peoples and rural leaders to the space to really advocate for their rights and livelihoods, and also advocate directly for climate finance to go to their communities, as opposed to going through all of these brokers along the way, so that by the time you actually get the money flows to the ground, there's actually really nothing left for those who are managing resources and needing the kind of support on the ground. So that's sort of how I see it, is really support for indigenous peoples and local communities to really participate in these discussions and, in fact, teach us how this should be done. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Emmy. I think because of time constraint, we have to move forward. We still have lots of interesting things to come up in this webinar. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. And please, dear participants, keep the questions coming, and some of the questions will be responded to through email. Emmy just shared a few minutes ago her contact details on the slides, but if you could kindly also wish to post it in the chat box, so that in case there are any specific questions that can be posted to you. Yeah, just a reminder, we've had a lot about the COP26 and the global processes in nature-based solutions. Just a quick reminder, as mentioned earlier on also by Emmy, that the nature-based solutions is just one of the 6 sub-themes of the World Forestry Congress. And a very nice stage has been set for this. the World Forestry Congress will bring together the global forest community to actually co-create pathways to rethink all of these approaches and sort of building the future together with forests. Thank you so much, Emmy, for that. And thank you for sharing your email in the chat box. If you have any questions, you can go direct to that email as well. Now, dear participants, we have to move on. Time is not so much of our friend. And now I have the pleasure to introduce to you my co-moderator as we move to the next segment of this webinar, Ms. Alina, who will lead us through the next session. Alina is a communication specialist at the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, in the Office of Climate Change, Environment and Biodiversity, and also a founding member of the office's own youth group. She serves as the communication focal point for the Dryland Sustainable Impact Program and the Food Systems, Land Use and Restoration Impact Program. Moreover, she is a member of the World Food Forum and co-leads the Education Track and Young Champions Program. Alina, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Amos, for this very kind introduction. Hello and welcome, everyone. And as youth promotion and development is very dear to me, I'm very delighted and also very excited to facilitate today's youth-oriented session on stories of change and how youth can and is already contributing to forest action in their communities. And therefore, we have invited 3 young and very interesting change makers who are able, through their own work, to drive change in their communities. And so what are we expecting of this 25-minute youth-centered segment? We're aiming at having a very interactive, sharp, and lively conversation where you, the audience, will get an insight into the panelists' work, how they were able to drive sustainable change in their own communities. And after this, we will have a dedicated Q&A session to address questions that you can write down in the chat. However, throughout the whole session, please be encouraged at any time to write your questions in the chat or raise your hand later at the dedicated session. Amos, could you please move to the next slide? So let me now dive into the session and introduce you to our 3 speakers. So the first one is Annalie Bustos. She has a bachelor's degree in biological science and a master's degree in ecology and nature conservation. And she's currently a PhD student in the research group on ecological interactions in agroecosystems called FAUBA in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Our second speaker is Dr. Charles Butt. He's the founder and executive director of the Tree Adoption in Uganda, a youth-centric organization powered by the vision to create communities where people and nature flourish. And last but not least, we have our third speaker, Tabi Yoda. Mr. Tabi Yoda is a global multi-awards winner and an expert in local communities, ecosystems resilience, and ambassador of the Great Green Wall and the AFR 100. Welcome to our participants. And let's start now by getting our panelists, by getting to know our panelists a little bit better and about the work that they are doing. And Annalie, ladies first, could you tell us how you are making a difference on the ground for both the forest ecosystems and the community you work in? And this question will apply also to the other 2 panelists. Over to you, Annalie.
Okay, thanks, Alina. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this amazing webinar. I will start saying that I'm living and working on the central area of Argentina. My province, Córdoba, is an area characterized by fertile and flat lands. And for that reason, on the last 100 years, forests and natural areas in general have been devastated by the advance of the agricultural frontier. And in just 10 decades, we have lost 95% of the forest cover. And this has negative impacts at the ecological level, but also on a social level, because given that the people who inhabit these lands have lost the cultural identity of the native landscape. So at today, there are just little forests in this area, and if this situation is not reversed, maybe the next generations or the new generations will not even know the forest and the natural landscape in my province. So for this reason, I've been working with my team to restore forests in the region, but including the local communities in these activities. So also making a strong dissemination in media about the work we are doing and about the importance of the forest and the ecosystem services they provide for us. And I believe this will have a multiplier effect on many more people who will understand and will care for the forest in Argentina. And because I believe that the progress at the environmental level must go hand in hand with the progress at the social level.
Thank you very much, Annalie. Very alarming and pressing words, but those imply also that we really need to take action and include the local communities. Thank you very much for giving us an insight. And I would pass the floor to the next panelist, to Charles Bat, with the same question. So tell us how you are making difference on the ground, and how does your community work look like? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Alina. And our work is not so different from what Annalie has been describing. So like you mentioned in the introduction, Tree Adoption Uganda is a youth-centric and non-governmental organization that is powered by the vision of creating communities where people and nature flourish. And for this, we really want to bring forestry at the very heart of communities. We do this through landscape restoration activities like planting trees, agroforestry, and we select this because we believe that these are activities that build the resilience, especially for smallholder farmers, against the changing climate that we are evidencing every other day. But what I want to point out that is really key and central to our work is the aspect of mindset change and intrinsically motivating these communities. There is a lot of knowledge in these communities, and we believe that all they need at the moment is facilitation to see action. So we do not come up with different interventions. We reach out to communities, learn from them, learn what they've always done, and try to scale that, try to promote that, try to enhance that, which gives us a lot of community buy-in. And finally, our work is really encapsulated around three aspects. One is education. So we take this local knowledge we get from these communities and spread it over to other communities, creating that form of knowledge exchange between communities, between different groups of farmers. And then secondly is around engaging, where we take people from all around the country, bring them together to do these restoration or tree planting activities. And finally, empowering, especially women that are vulnerable to climate change effects by training them and skilling them on how to be resilient, how to address the various effects of climate change, like flooding that they're seeing in their communities. Thank you.
Many thanks, Charles. And let me just re-echo 2 or 3 words that really hit me. The first one was resilience. The second one was education, which is really important, and also the behavior change inside, because also FAO is now looking more and more into how can we actually drive change and change people's behavior. Many thanks for this very good insight to your work. And then let me pass the floor to our third speaker. Tabi, could you also give us an insight into your work? Over to you.
Thank you very much, and I'm really pleased to be with you all today. Unfortunately, I wasn't in my home. I'm actually on transit, moving from one community to another things. And as you know, I wear many caps. I'm working also as an ambassador for the Great Green Wall. So that's why I'm living from Nigeria today and moving across the borders through the forest and getting into Cameroon, where I'm equally doing so much work for the Great Green Wall and the AFR 100. And the target that we have set for 2030 is to plant 1 billion trees through the initiative called 1 billion trees for Africa's Great Green Wall. So I just want to put very clearly that I'm impressed by the first presentations that were done. Was really holistic by, is it Michel, or I don't know how to really call him, but I really appreciate that presentation. It struck me very deeply because it spoke so much of what we are doing and what we intend to do and what we should be doing as individuals and as groups and as entire citizens of the world. So for me, I'm actually working in coordinating and of course leading on the field, on the ground, tangible and measurable actions that have direct bearing on people's livelihoods in terms of enhancing first the capacity of people to adapt to the changes, especially the climatic changes, and of course in such a way that it catalyzes rural economies through nature-based solutions and results that can be such as jobs and income, physical, the resilience of people to the different multi-hazards on the field. That it's not just food insecurity, but landscape challenges like desertification, which is so very vast and massive, critical challenges that our solution on code on one side, very importantly, physical landscape restoration alone doesn't offer what communities live on. So for us, we are trying to make sure that we enhance those natural resources and nature capital, especially unlocking some of the hidden potentials in these resources through the restoration value chains that can actually create a holistic, set of opportunities for communities. And in that process, we have been able to plant 3 million trees in 33 communities in 11 countries in the entire Sahel. And this has resulted into the restoration of 84, if you put all the landscapes together, 84 hectares of landscape. It is small, but for us it is quite much because it is actually delivering the kind of impact that we need to see on the livelihoods of the communities. And aside that, it has also created 9. We're able to attract 12 young people from Nigeria, Chad, Cameroon, and Niger, in Libya for more than 2 years after their failed attempt to migrate to Europe. And this has a very strong relationship to my own story, because when I finished university, I stayed at home for like 4 months. I didn't get a job. I was having a huge appetite for migration to Europe. But at the last hour, at 12:15 midnight, when I was supposed to go join my 2 friends for us to take the journey across the Sahara, and when I changed my mind the next week after that, I started planting trees in my community and started creating a nursery that became a very serious, big economic resource that has today become a big model for restoration all across the entire continent of Africa. So I am mightily very grateful that we all are sitting and discussing about this critical issue that is very central to human life, not just to the environment, but these lost values and those neglected values, as well as the values that needs to be unlocked to create the potentials for huge opportunities for jobs, for income and livelihoods. And of course, I look forward to any question that might be coming from these, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I see how you are highlighting also to follow up more on a bottom-up approach, to work on the ground, to invest into the capacity building also of young people on the ground. So thank you very much for this very detailed insight into your life and your work, and compliments to all of you for leading such a wonderful work and projects. And we have to be a little bit mindful of the time, but I will move to the next question, and maybe you can give an answer in like 30 or 40 seconds. So as you're all working on the ground and as young people, what are some of the key challenges of making a tangible impact on the ground, and what are the lessons learned from your own story? Over to you, Annalie.
Thanks, Aline. Well, I think there are many challenges in this work, from gaining scientific knowledge to making decisions based on the best available evidence, the management, the funding, establishing alliances with key social actors and stakeholders. But well, despite that difficulties, I understood that we are in a special decade where many people are becoming aware of the importance of caring for the environment. And I can see that because the people of the local communities are open and receptive to activities and invitations to work on forest restoration. And that's for me very hopeful. And also, and this was a very big lesson for me. It was a challenge to understand that nature's time and its processes are not the same as ours, the human times. And that's important for many reasons. First of all, everything that we are losing in nature takes a long time to recover. And that is one of the main messages that I try to give to the communities, to the people. And secondly, as those times are slower than ours, we must work continuously and with great enthusiasm, but respecting the processes and times of nature. We cannot impose immediate and short-term results. And that is why it's important to plan long-term goals and inspire new generations to continue doing this work after us.
Thank you, Annalie. Yeah, I think the time component is very important, and also the fact how you were describing, okay, we now got the train rolling, so raising awareness is fine, but now we also need to translate this into action. Great, thank you very much. Charles, over to you, same question. So what are the challenges and the lessons learned from your own project?
Thank you very much, Alina. For me personally, from my observation and my experience, the challenge that many young people entering into the restoration space face is transparency for tree planting initiatives. And this is something I identified very earlier on when I started engaging in tree planting, is we come up and say, I've planted 10,000 trees here, I've planted 20,000 trees there, but how do you objectively verify that those are actually trees that entered into the ground? And a lot of our work has really focused around that, integrating technology in tree planting initiatives. So at Tree Adoption Uganda, each and every tree we plant, we use a mobile phone application to take a picture of it, record its GPS coordinates, and have some way of objectively showcasing that all the resources we are receiving are actually translating into trees in the ground. And I believe that will be also the lesson I share with everyone else, is try to find ways in which you can show your partners, you can show your stakeholders that they can objectively verify. You have data to show how many trees you've planted, what species, and where they are geographically, to build confidence for them to invest more in you and for them to invest more in ecosystem restoration.
Charles, many thanks. And I think this is a very important aspect, transparency. And this draws also through all of our work, because even when countries need to report back on their NDCs, on emissions, so transparency also creates trust, and trust obviously creates also stability and progress. Very, very well said. Tabi, also over to you in less than 1 minute. What are your lessons learned and what are the challenges on the ground?
Thank you very much. I want to appreciate Charles's and remains the earlier speaker's point. I love that aspect, transparency. It's something that we are seriously facing challenges with, because we want to make sure that there is measurability and tangibility of everything. And then there is a whole momentum, which I will throw very much to the big organizations like the FAOs and the JEV and the rest, that are emphasizing on the term tree planting, rather than emphasizing on tree growing. And of course, not just tree growing, but ecosystem restoration. I am an indigenous person, and of course, I am the chair of the African Alliance of Indigenous Knowledge for Disaster Risk Reduction and Climate. So I understand very well since 4 years how to grow trees and how to protect nature. So I wish to say the challenge we are facing is that people are looking at trees in isolation, not looking at it in a holistic manner as something that is just a unit in the entire system of the biodiversity or ecosystem, because there is water that is involved, there is the soil erosion that is involved that needs to be protected, and all the components put together. So land restoration is not just about planting trees, it's about holistically, managing, conserving, protecting, and enhancing sustainability of our own very ecosystem that we rely on. So to say, one other challenge that I want to share with you is that young people also don't know how to resource this natural capital in such a way that it actually creates jobs for them. So this is one of the challenges that we are facing, how to actually build the capacity of this critical mass of young people for them to leverage on these opportunities that nature-based solutions actually offer in creating, conserving, processing, packaging, and putting into the market, and not just into the market, different services that are entirely available in the entire value chains for ecosystem and nature-based work. So it's a huge challenge that we think that we need to come together, build the synergies, which are actually not there. It's a big challenge itself. Young people are working in isolation. There is so much isolation. We aren't seeing synergies and collaboration. So one of the recommendations I will say in terms of as a result, as a solution to these challenges is that let us enhance, synergies, collaborations, and the capacity of young people to be able to leverage on these opportunities, not just planting trees for hype for social media, but planting, growing, and conserving them in the best interest, well-meaning purpose for nature, because it is this nature that holds our future. Thank you.
Many thanks. Well said again, all of you, really. And I totally agree. I think capacity building is important, but also collaboration between senior and young people, absolutely. And there is one question also from the chat. I would pass on to Amos, who would like to raise the question to our panelists. Over to you.
Thank you very much. A question specifically to Charles. Charles, as all of you might know already from the audience, that one of the key aspects of this webinar is to sort of raise awareness and promote youth engagement through the World Forestry Congress Youth Forest Changemaker competition that is currently running, that we hope to receive after receiving words of inspiration from the panelists that we have today. We are hopeful that we will receive more applications from you, that you'll be so inspired to submit in the work that you're currently doing. Just to let you know that Charles Pate with us here on the panel was one of the winners, was the youth winner in the 14th World Forestry Congress that was in Durban in South Africa. Charles, could you please share with us quickly what your take was from that experience of winning that contest and being able to participate and get your work to the World Forestry Congress?
Thank you very much, Amos, for this question. And my reflections will not really differ so much from what Duchell shared earlier on the
I think he froze.
Yes, we might have lost Charles momentarily. Let's see if he comes back. Amos, move on to maybe another question, or?
Yeah, I mean, as Oh, yeah,
There
Charles
he
is
is.
back. Charles, I think we lost you for a while, if you could. Charles, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. Sorry. Yes, I was just mentioning that my reflections won't differ so much from what Duchell shared around the work that young people are doing and what they are capable of doing. One of my biggest takeaways from the World Forestry Congress that time was that actually there are ways, and it's very possible for young people to be meaningfully engaged in forestry, in ecosystem restoration. I think the World Forestry Congress gave us such a platform that allowed us to have our voices heard, that allowed us to have our ideas shared, that allowed us to develop the confidence to bring our ideas, to bring our work on the table. And I also believe that that's what other young people need. They need a seat at the table, not only for a photo moment, but to be meaningfully engaged.
Thank you very much for that response, Charles. I will hand you over to Alina to continue.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amos, and thank you very much, Charles, for your response. And I can just tell you, monitoring the chat, that all the young people in the audience are agreeing with you on what you have said. And I would just wrap this session up by asking one more question to all of you. Maybe you can keep it also short, like in less than a minute, or even in a word. What is a word of advice you would give youth trying to make a difference in the field? And hereby you can also connect it to maybe the choice on what kind of academic career to pursue, but also like youth on the ground in local communities. What would be your advice to them? Annalie, over to you.
Okay, Alina. Well, I will tell them to maybe be patient with their personal processes and the processes of the projects they work on, but to move forward with confidence, because I think we all are important and necessary in the climate actions, and we need as many people as possible involved in this work. And also, I think that the results will come, and I'm sure all the people that I work in this will do a wonderful work and will achieve wonderful results. So that's my word: be confident and go ahead.
Thank you very much. Very motivational words. Thank you, Annalie. Charles, over to you.
Yes, so what we struggle with as young people is the immensity of the problems we face, and the feeling that we cannot do much. And very many young people are afraid to start because they think it will not impact or it will not create any difference. All I can say is that young people everywhere are doing something, and so do something. Because, as I've mentioned before, our small contributions in the different communities where we live, when summed up together, is what will constitute global change. So do that little thing, do that something small already. Thank you.
Great, yes. Even the smallest step can lead to change. Exactly, very well said. Tabi, over to you.
Yes, adding to what the earlier speakers have said, don't look too much outside. Look just around you. Be innovative. Be real to yourself. Think within your own context. Swing to your strength. You can never be somebody else. Each time you want to be someone else, you represent someone else. You're living someone else's dream. So when you pursue your own dream based on your own opportunities and advantage around you, especially by swinging to your strength and looking around the context where you live, be real, have hope, and be very innovative enough and learn to collaborate. Learning process is a very great process through which no one stops doing. The day you stop learning, you stop progressing. Thank you.
Okay, I couldn't ended this on a better note than your words. The way you stop learning, you stop progressing. Exactly. Well said. And I also liked all of you underlined that the component of collaborations and exchange is very important because we're all in this together. We just have one world. We just have one ecosystem that we need to protect. And I also encourage all the panelists to go through the chat and please feel free to reply to the questions that are still there. And we also had one explicitly asking what FAO is doing for youth in the context of nature-based solutions and in general. Let me just tell you that FAO for almost 2 years now has established an FAO Youth Committee that is very motivated to foster youth engagement inside, but most of the time outside of the organization, to engage with young people. And out of this FAO Youth Committee was born also the World Food Forum, a platform where youth and youth initiatives can come together and exchange with international organizations to find solutions together and to finally, and also to echo Charles' words, to give young people a seat at the table. I will also share all the information in the chat and also my email address, and please feel free to reach out to all our panelists, to their great initiatives and to the FAO Youth Committee. And by having said this, I would pass the floor over to Amos again.
Thank you very much, Alina, for taking us through that wonderful session. And thank you all to our panelists for the very, very insightful discussions. And I am very inspired by all the things that have been said here. And I believe that many people who are attending to this session or those who will follow the recording of this session will equally be inspired by all that has been said by our panelists. We understand that there is a lot of questions in the chat, but thanks, our panelists are putting their emails in the chat. If you have any questions specifically addressed to any of them, you can follow up on an email, or I believe that there will be some responses coming through in the chat as well. Keep the chat active and keep the questions coming there. Thank you very much, Alina. And as we move forward, I will now hand us over to Pierre Andrea, who will take us through the next segment. Thank you. Over to you, Pierre Andrea.
Thank you very much, Amos, and thanks everybody who has participated in the panel, and thanks, Alina, for the great facilitation and moderation. I told you that today we had really an agenda packed with goods. So we're now getting into our last segment of the day, and we'll be talking about competition. If you're following the various outlet, the WFC publication outlet, the website, or the social media, you know that we recently launched this video competition, Forest Changemaker video competition, and the deadline is until end of the month, and by participating in the competition, you could win a trip to Korea. So it's not just an ordinary competition, you know, there are some real good prizes here up for grabs. Just a quick reminder, and I saw that Amos had placed the link in the chat, and you'll receive also information after the webinar. Just to remind you what we're looking for. We're looking for short videos, about 4 minutes, where a video that highlights and introduces yourself and the work you're doing, and how this work benefits forest and the communities that are living in forest or that depend on forest. Can be a project or initiative that you're working or involved with, or also your everyday job. We're looking for stories. We're not looking for professional videos, but we're looking for good quality videos, and that we'll be talking in just a minute. But so that you know that we don't need very fancy technology, maybe what we did, we already have it in terms of recording and editing our video. It's our mobile phone. And again, the deadline is end of this month. We're receiving some submission, but of course we would like to get many more, as Peter also mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. So we hope that our next session will encourage more of you to try and join the competition by submitting your videos. I'm really happy that today we have here with us Kieron Bascom from Tech for Agri, joining us from Trinidad. I met Kieron a few years back, also through a youth-led initiative or competition. Back then I was supporting an organization and we had a call for to select social media reporters to cover an event. And I remember that Kieron put in his application, but he was too qualified to join the team of volunteers on stage. Kieron is the creator of Tech for Agri. We still collaborated. He was still part of the large team back then supporting that event. And I've been following Kieron since. He's the creator of Tech for Agri, which is a social enterprise that uses media, journalism, and communication services to support the agricultural sector. So he's coming from a slightly different, not from the forestry sector, but what he's going to tell us will still apply and will be very useful for the video competition, for submitting the video competition. Kieron is based in Trinidad and Tobago. And Tech for Agri was the first entity to start blogging about technology and innovation and successes in the field as a way to share knowledge and empower agri youth. Kieron is still very much active via a number of institutional engagement. And without any further ado, I'd like to invite Kieron to come in and share his screen. I'm going to stop sharing my video and handing over to you, Kieron. I see you. I cannot hear you yet.
Should be able to hear me now.
Yes, we can hear and we can see you now. Thank you, Kieron. The floor is all yours.
All right.
And by the way, let me warn our participant that we're likely to finish a few minutes late. So I hope you can still stay with us throughout till the end of the webinar. Kieron, please.
All right. Thanks very much, Pierre. And thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Hope all is well. Let me just get my presentation up.
Yeah,
okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Kieron.
All right, sure, no problem. All right. Well, thanks again for having me. Just very quickly. All right. So I am Kieron Bascom, as Pierre mentioned. I run Tech for Agri, and we are a social enterprise that uses media and journalism to, bring these good, positive things towards our local agriculture sector. We've gone from just simple writing to doing a whole lot of mobile work. So it's, a positive thing for us to say we've had all this time, we've learned, we've grown, and we've really understood the importance of having these digital skills that will take us forward especially now into 2022. So when it comes to storytelling, you all are the persons participating in the competition. You can consider yourself the reporter, the fact finder, the interpreter, the presenter. You are the ones who are saying, this is the reason why I need to do the video that I'm doing concerning my community or my forest ecosystem community. And in order to tell that story, the mobile video is your tool. It doesn't necessarily have to be your phone alone. It can be any small camera or any accessory, anything that is quite literally mobile, as you can pick up and go with it. Excuse me. And it's something that people really need to understand. Your mobile device and all these other small accessories and supporting tools, they're extremely, extremely powerful. And they can be utilized to produce some amazing quality work. So I'll head in straight on into tips. I guess Pierre, if I'm going over time, please let me know. But I'll just keep going because I know we have a limited amount of time. So in terms of storytelling, basically you are now trying to find an angle to tell a story, and you are sort of constructing what you are constructing the overall story. Starting off with the basics, everyone uses the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, how. It's just a general way to understand anything that has happened. It's a simple way to make a report. And I would add to that in particular, having a unique point. So some type of statistic, something that's relatable to the audience that you're targeting, something really new and innovative, or some kind of new valuable something. Anything at all that is going to be very unique to make that article or that story plan that you're constructing really, really stand out, even if we're starting off with basic 5 W's. And of course, you would want to be making a plan, understanding a beginning and the end as to how is your video going to flow and what is going to allow it to be consistent and coherent. You can also start really playing around with those these stories and how you structure them. So because I work as a journalist, we have to think about how do we structure our stories? How do we present stories so that they don't all sound the same? And definitely we don't want the participants in the conversation to all sound the same. But you would have to then look at the details within your context, because not everywhere is going to have the same history, or not every stakeholder or ground level person is going to have the same viewpoint. So looking at these specific details and then sort of comparing them together can really add richness to your story. And of course, if you want to when you're presenting this information, try to, of course, find a way to back it up with evidence of some type of expertise. You don't see regular news reporters randomly interviewing people who don't make sense. They try to make sure that this person has some type of schooling and some knowledge and some kind of exposure towards this type of work when it comes to presenting an interview or presenting some type of report. And it's always, they look for someone who's calm, who knows what they're doing. So you now would have to choose who is going to be representing this sort of verified knowledge in your story or your video. Consider, again, I was mentioning that a second ago, considering how you present this story, looking at the different aspects to it. Take a look at the bigger picture. How does one thing impact upon the other? These are just means and ways to really find the best out of your story. It doesn't have to be everything all rolled up into one, but these are some of the ways that you can really kind of make a simple story better. And then finally, I think that's the last of this section to say, collaborating with your community. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, there's lots of redundancy when people try to do the same things over and over. And the idea is that when you are presenting your work, you want it to be new, you want it to be fresh. And so it would be best to just check around, like who else is doing what you are doing? Who else is working on this story? It doesn't have to be a community leader like yourself, but it can be some type of other stakeholder, a village elder, or, a policymaker, whoever is closest and most interactive in your community. See how whatever they are doing can work together with what you are doing. It's just checking for that collaboration. So I think, do I have everybody still with me? I hope I am going good to time. And so I have a very brief example now of what is possible with mobile video. Now, I don't want people to be like, I don't think I could, when they see it, they think, oh, they have to produce something so elaborate for their stuff. You don't. I'm just showing you what mobile video can do and the extent at which it can be done. So we are using this mobile video to continue Tech Factory's media production here in Trinidad and Tobago. And I wonder if you would, I'm not sure if you would hear the sound, but you, at the very least, you'll be able to see the video.
2021 has brought challenges that our world, our region, and our communities have never experienced before. As we all continue to recover and adapt to our new age, a strategy of collaboration cross-cutting sectors among all our value chain actors is paramount. Join us as we take you on a journey towards safe food for tea and tea.
All right, so that was a lot. The entire video, everything that you saw, the majority of it, was filmed and edited with the same phone that you're seeing on screen right now. Of course, we got drone shots. We did a couple of digital shots that, especially the last closing title, Rise of Agriculture, that was done on a computer. But once all those videos were completed, they were sent to the phone, my phone, and I edited out this promo so that I can send it to the clients and they can know where their money went. So this is us saying that we can utilize these skills, and if you keep working with them and using these tips, you can, build something as elaborate as that to serve whatever purpose that you need. I'm just checking the chat to see if there's any questions. I don't believe that there are.
That's all good, Kieran. Actually, the chat is now blocking your view, your screen. So maybe you can minimize the chat because and if we can just go on with the presentation and wrap it up in a couple of minutes.
All right, okay, cool.
Thanks,
so
Kieran.
That's good. So we only have a few more slides, it's basically the last half of it. So we're moving on to mobile video, which is the current and will be the trend of the future, given our reliance on digital media and video and online video and things like that. So we starting off nice and simple with mobile video. Some of these tips are based on traditional media work. Like you can use these tips together with a whole camera crew, the usual, the works if you want, if that's where you are heading. I don't think community leaders would have the funding for all of that, but this is where you are simply adding basic steps to improve what you're doing, whether you're using a mobile device or some type of other device. So these rules are sort of universal in a way. So starting off with framing, it's one of the basic steps where you are basically setting up how you're going to shoot. You have an example here in the background, and this actually shows some of the basic shots. So for example, a close-up, it's an actual close-up on the phone itself. Then if you look at the shot itself, it's a medium shot because it's from waist height. And the phone itself could actually flip the other way, and that would allow you to do a vertical shot, especially if this video is going to be used in some type of social media that scrolls up. So that's basically everything, TikTok, Instagram, etc. And at one point, vertical wasn't even considered a shot to be used, but because of literally how people film the phone vertically, that has sort of influenced and changed it to become acceptable now. So it's just more shots for you to use. And then the rule of thirds is where you have your grid lines on the screen. And as you can again see where this person is being interviewed, she is situated at the intersection. If there were grid lines on the screen, you follow the rule of thirds. and place the interviewees on intersections, place your objects on the intersections of those grid lines. It's all phones have an option to see the grid lines. You can set it so that it's there permanently, and it just helps you to really have a good framing. When you have that framing, you can move on to doing all these different shots, different kinds of shots. They serve different purposes. So for example, if you're doing a wide angle shot, that could be used to establish and open up your video. You can also use, whatever makes sense for what type of story you are telling. And there's a link here where it takes you to Mr. Rob Montgomery, who is a past journalist of RTE, which is the second largest news outlet in Ireland for their broadcasting. And Mr. Rob Montgomery, is one of the persons who really pushed mobile journalism and really built the field into what it is now. And along him and other persons from around the world as well. But they are the ones who literally, set up their classes and teach persons. And so this is one of their simple little cheat sheets where they show you the multiple kind of different shots that can take place. And remember, you have a phone, and so that phone can go where a regular traditional camera that goes on your shoulder or is big and boxy in your hand cannot go. So take advantage of that. Any tall people out there, take some tall shots, overhead shots. I often capitalize on that. And if it just happen to be shorter, then you take some shots low to the ground. Like literally just add a bit of creativity. When it comes to lighting, primarily for mobile video, we focus on outdoors. So you will want to look for those golden hours between 6 a.m. to, let's say, 8 a.m., maybe 9 a.m., where the shadow falls, the light, the day is early, and those golden hours would extend itself to in the evening time, between 4 and 6 p.m. before the sun sets. Those are the best hours to get the best natural light. And it's tough. I've had experiences where you're telling persons, I can't film if there isn't proper lighting, and then I have to go and film in the sun, and I have to do all this post-production stuff. It will save you a headache if you work to suit with the best lighting you have, and that's the natural lighting. You would always need to film wherever the shadow is falling. So, for example, this picture here is a good example where I'm saying I should have taken the picture on the other side, because that's the light is coming from that side. But I specifically wanted to capture the sun, and with the intention of editing the picture afterwards. So again, I chose based on my choices. But if I really wanted to capture this picture in a better way, the best idea would have been to film to wherever the light is falling, wherever the shadow is falling. Audio is another something that's very important. For a good video to be good, it has to have good audio. So use of a mic, depending on what your environment is going to be and what sound you are going to collect, it helps to say, it helps immensely to utilize a microphone. Oftentimes, like let's say for interviews, we can use lav mics or wireless mics. But shotgun mics work as well. You'll see a picture of it on the next slide. It works as well. There's a trend on TikTok. So this on the bottom right-hand corner, saying road, that's the shotgun mic. And then the little lav mic in the middle here to the top, on the top row of these accessories. So these are the tools that you would have used to collect audio. I was mentioning that on TikTok, persons sometimes when they're doing their storytelling, they actually utilize the mic of their headphones. And it's a good bet because it does improve definitely the audio, and it does help for voiceovers. So let's say you had a video with bad audio, you can, completely mute the audio in that video and do a voiceover, add some background music, and make that a better experience. Because bad audio or shaky video, things like those things, they do nothing but detract from your videos. When it comes to mobile editing, that is something that you just have to get one of these apps and just get your hands in them. The more you use the app, the better you get at using it. Some of these apps include CapCut, InShot, and Velo, or you can say VLLO. These are all Android-based apps where it's free and you have an astonishingly wide selection of options to choose from in order to put all the elements of your story together. There's another one called VN Video Editor, which is actually for Android and iOS, and I believe KinoMaster is also for iOS as well. These are, sorry, KinoMaster and Filmora Go, you have to pay for those apps. If you don't, then there will be a watermark when you try to export your final video. But the others, VN Video Editor in particular, you do not have to pay for. And it's a serious tool that's just freely available for people to utilize. So once you have those apps, you start looking at, okay, what text am I adding? What photos, subtitles, they need to be, do they need to be in whatever language, clear, etc. Are you adding any other elements to the story or along with your story plan, and you start putting it together? You will have to decide which app you use and you think is best. I currently use Filmora Go. I've heard a lot of positive things on VN Video Editor. InShot, some of these apps have been around very, very long. For example, InShot did not used to be as elaborate as it is now, but it just goes to show you that is the trend. These tools and accessories are available specifically for the phone. As you can see in the top right hand again, these things this is, camera equipment, reporting equipment, but it's definitely heading down that mobile only route. And it's something that we have to consider now, because we need to be able to, as journalists, as the people who are presenting information and really, especially in your case, working for a community, we really need to be able to do our best at it, because the content we put out there is competing with other content online. So I think I've reached the end of my presentation. Yes, I have. So I hope I made good time. And if there's any questions, please
Thank
do
you
let me know.
very much, Kieran. Thanks a lot. I see some appreciation in the chat for the very practical tips that you have presented. So really appreciate you coming in and sharing the example of really high-end product to give us the understanding of what we can do with just a small device or a set of small devices. Just to reiterate that for the competition, we're not looking for professional videos. So if you are here, don't go to Kieran to get your video produced by him, right? That won't work. We're looking for creativity. We're looking for good stories that shows impact of your work. But definitely applying the tips that Karen just shared with us, lights, audio, compositions, and all that, that will definitely make a difference in terms of your end product. With this, I would like to end here. We are way beyond time. We're on time, 10 minutes. Next time we should book you for 2 hours, guys, so we don't have to rush through the various segments of the webinar. It has been a pleasure for me being here with you today, and I'd like now to hand over to Amos to bring the meeting to a close. Amos.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for staying back with us. Thank you, Karen, for summing up with that nice presentation on how people can make videos and how they can submit very good videos for the Forest Changemaker contest. Dear participants, we are now coming to the very end of this webinar, and we thank you for having stayed back with us till this far. And I also want to thank Pierre-Andre. It looks like you have something to say, but if you, okay, cool, yeah. I also want to thank our interpreters or translators for staying with us this far and facilitating the translation to those who also needed it either in Spanish or English. Also, thanks to our speaker who set the stage for us, Ms. Amy Duchell, and the panelists who were also very much, who brought a very much insightful, thought-provoking discussion to this webinar. And big thanks to the team that put together this webinar and to the World Forestry Congress for having supported this. We will have other webinars coming forth in the future, and we hope you will be able to join us for the webinars. Yes, just quickly mentioning that the Forest Changemaker contest is still running on, and there is a lot of things that may be coming up very soon, and stay out on the look in the World Forestry Congress communication channels, the website, the Facebook page, and the other different social media pages to be updated with what is happening with the World Forestry Congress. With that, if there is anything else from my team, from the team that put together this, Pierre-Andrea, Catherine, no one else.
We're good. We'll start some music, and because that's what we do at the beginning and at the end. So no, sorry, I made a mistake. It should just be computer audio. Right, let's get the party started. I think we're good.
Thank you very much.
We'll all be, we'll send you follow-up emails with the recordings and all the materials. And I still see Peter here. Peter, would you like to come in? Thanks for staying with us for the meeting.
No, not really. I mean, the music is much better than I can ever be, but I just wanted to mention that it was really enjoyable to listen to the discussion. I learned a lot from you guys, so it's really wonderful, and thank you for the commitment staying throughout. We are looking forward to see all of you in Seoul next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, your evening, and we'll be in touch.
I was just sort of wondering if we want to all turn our cameras on and I take a screenshot of this.
That would be good. Yeah. If you're still with us, folks, please turn the camera on. So maybe let's wave thumb up or just wave. I don't know, whatever you'd like. When we're all good. Thanks, Kelly. We see you again. Maria, sorry, Malala, Fernanda, Agostina, please forgive us for running over time, and thanks for being with us throughout. Hans, if you have the camera on, KFS, everybody, let's go. Thanks, folks. Thanks, everybody.